It's official as of Saturday, November 7th. Joe Biden has won the 2020 presidential race alongside his running mate Kamala Harris. Holy shit. A lot of us, myself included, were starting to get a bit nervous, but they pulled it out. I'm happy. A lot of us are happy. Props to voters who voted blue down the ballot, the workers, the poll workers, everybody who endured the bad weather, the long lines, risking exposure to COVID-19 and getting your ballots in that fucking box for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and blue or Democrats down the ballot. Thank you. Enjoy this moment. Be happy. Rejoice. Now, for us Americans, this is step one of unfucking the 4-year ultra disaster that has been the Trump administration on this nation. Now, last episode, I talked about next steps and mapping out what I think we should do as citizens in this 2-part episode. These are just suggestions. So right now, I gotta kick it off by addressing my fellow African Americans, AKA Black people. So my message is this. The victory begs the question of what does this mean for Black Americans going forward? And what do we do? What are our next steps? This is indeed a celebratory moment, but if you are Black in America and you don't realize there is still work to be done as citizens, then perhaps your misconnection is that you may be looking at this great moment through a very narrow scope. So, having said that, let's reconnect the dots. Joe Biden's presidential win is not the finish line for anybody. It's more like the start of a brand new race. So, for Black people, we need to look at every election cycle more like a championship series. Elections aren't one game, winner take all kind of events where everything magically falls into place once votes are tallied. No, each year will present unnamed challenges to us. So what's crucial for us is to position our votes, our energies, based on the changing needs, depending on what's happening in the world. So in my mind, this victory for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and other Democrats is like game one of a 7-game series. Our organization, supporting one another, our mental toughness, and what we do during each cycle in terms of advocacy, protests, community outreach, grassroots, donations could really determine how governments or government officials serve us going forward. Think about that. Over 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. So what that means basically to me, that at least 70 million people were on board with re-electing a White House administration that was more or less accommodating to police brutality, vigilantes, thugs, and a judicial system that demonstrates the lives and well-being of Black people who are very, very low priorities. So this has been a tough 4 years, I should say, for Black people, particularly in the last 8 months with the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and I would say many other Black men and women slain and or brutalized by the hands of law enforcement is a horrible thing. Horrible. So what I'm proud of and what I'm happy about is the way Black people made their presence felt through marches, in protests of police brutality, and with the voter turnout, particularly during a global pandemic. So I gotta say, much respect to Black people of all ages, especially the younger generations. I'm really proud of them. Everybody who at times risked their personal safety, whether it's police brutality, vigilantes, and of course, coronavirus. One of the things that we need to recognize who among us should be on the pay no mind list, I'm gonna say. Now, it's not a phrase I made up, but I'm borrowing a phrase from the movie Goodfellas, where in one of the scenes, Joe Pesci's character, whose name was Tommy D or something like that, got pissed off during a card game when he thought, I think he thought his drink order was being ignored. And so the line that Joe Pesci's character said, or was like, what the fuck, am I on the pay no mind list? It was like an iconic scene in cinematic history. So what we've seen in the past 4 years are Black people that have worn Confederate attire, the MAGA hats. They've stood shoulder to shoulder with other Trump supporters during protests, and side by side, some of Trump's allies holding signs in the background that read, "Blacks for Trump." Others have prayed over Trump. They vouched for him via social media. They've acted as surrogates. They've spoken at RNC or the Republican conventions and advocated for another 4 years of Trump. So all the support and advocacy by Black people for a man with a documented history of discriminating against Black people for anything numbering or going from fair housing, calling for the death of innocent Black men in the Central, with the Central Park 5, calling our athletes son of a bitches, insulting our women. There is no justifiable defense for any Black person who have casted a vote in singing the praises of a man that cozies up to white supremacists and telling large crowds of white people that they have, quote, good genes, which is a not so subtle wink to a Nazi theory of improving white purity through good breeding. So when you really break it down, these people, these Black people who are advocating for the re-election of a man that supports theories of a hate group that wants to see Black people dead, what the fuck? This is why they should be ignored regardless of their name or their social status. These self-loathing people don't deserve our time. They don't deserve our dollars, our social media follows, our clicks, or in some cases, our votes if they're elected officials. I can't fathom the levels of stupidity in supporting a man that protects people that wish death upon your race, which is in this case, the Black race. This is a weird version of Stockholm Syndrome where, if you remember, victims side with their abusers and their captors when there's thousands of hours of video of Trump saying racist shit over and over. So to these self-destructive, self-loathing Black people, I say, leave them be. You want Trump land, you want that universe, fine. Go with them. Take that bar of white national racism, lather up with that shit, and have at it. But for conscious Black people with dignity, pay them no mind. Let them stay with their captors. Let them stay with their oppressors. One thing that stood out in my mind during, I want to say, the protests of George Floyd's death was the corporate outreach, to the Black community. You may have seen their social media posts. You may have seen them displaying the BLM badge on their websites and through email blasts telling us how they value us, African Americans, as customers. I frankly don't know the numbers, but I don't get the sense that corporations I don't know. I don't know in terms of patronage, like giving their brand, like, I don't know. It's not enough for me, for these big corporations to publicly and acknowledge that as Black people, our lives hold just as much value as white people. That's, to me, that's like doing the bare minimum. One of the things I did during that period around, I think it was April or May, was to write back to these companies. And I would give customer feedback when I was solicited through their phone calls, through the customer service calls, through questionnaires, and telling them, thank you. This is nice. But what we need you to do is we need you to vote with your feet, as one man once put it. So acknowledging our value as customers is one thing, but they need to show it by revamping hiring practices and revamping internal policies on diversity and inclusion, but do this by putting qualified, competent Black people in jobs and in seats on company boards to help shape meaningful policy that supports that and serving customers and serving the community, not creating this bullshit ass, these bullshit ass diversity boards that only serve the optics for the company's image. Now, a few months back, I had a friend of mine who was asked to sit on one of these so-called diversity tasks or think tanks or task force or whatever to represent the Black voice. And inside of a few weeks, the whole thing fell apart. So we're not short on talent in the Black community and great minds in the Black community. We got more than, I want to say, 4 million African Americans that hold college degrees. So for you, Black people, don't be shy about demanding better from the businesses that you patronize or the businesses or corporations that you work at. Make sure you're being fair and being reasonable, but you always got to ask yourself, if a particular group of problems are clearly tied to you as a Black consumer or as a Black employee, or is this just a problem that's perhaps symptomatic of an issue that's unrelated to race? So you got to kind of weigh it out. But if you find they aren't receptive to our needs as a Black employee, then simply look for another employer that's more accommodating to your needs. And if this is a business we're talking about, then as a consumer, you have the right and you have the option of taking your Black dollars and, putting them elsewhere. But let them know why you're leaving through their social media, or through their customer service feedback. So they know. And like in this growing age of data collection, maybe if enough people do it, they'll start getting the message and do a bit of a course change or course correction if enough Black people complain about that. And you may have options to support a Black business as an alternative anyway. So there's that. You can support Black businesses. They're out there. So anyway, so same thing with your white friends and your colleagues. Part of what I do is I respectfully and I honestly educate people who know nothing about Black culture when it's necessary. Sometimes it has come on the heels of an inappropriate comment. Other times, to their credit, some of my white friends and some of my white acquaintances have honestly, copped to not knowing and respectfully asking me questions about our culture that they understandably don't get and they don't comprehend in terms of any number of social or sensitive issues that we deal with as Black people. And in all fairness, they're not going to get that from somebody but a Black person instead of, some TV show or some movie. Now, you don't have to turn these conversations into a hostile scene where you're yelling like Samuel Jackson, but I want to say that it is helpful when we can incrementally fill in knowledge gaps where people just don't know. So the next thing I want to address is our discipline as people Right now, a lot of people are pissed off and heartbroken that Donald Trump lost the presidential race. Some of these people may be in law enforcement. They may be your colleagues or your supervisors at your job, or perhaps just some regular citizens out there in the street or at the grocery store or wherever. If you experience that, or you experience new levels of hostility with these people, this could be why. Trump's re-election loss is a fresh and deep-cutting wound for them. Unfortunately, we may be an object of that aggression or hostility. So beware of people trying to bait you into something stupid or breaking the law where you end up in a bad situation like jail or whatnot. Now, a few years ago, when Trump won the 2016 election, some supporters were, you may remember, aggressively taunting and shit-talking Democrats and liberals. Why? Because they felt, this, I'm guessing, sense of pride and empowerment from the racist chief in charge. It was a changing of the guard, if you will. Now they're crestfallen. And that broken identity is all some of them really have right now. And what better way to take out that aggression, which is misplaced, than to cause harm to a person of color or a liberal or a Democrat? I'm here to tell you that your job one, is to stay out of jail, stay out of the hospital, stay out of the emergency room, and stay out of the city morgue. So be smart. Better days are coming for us. Defend yourself lawfully if need be, but don't take the bait. Let them break the law. That doesn't have to be you. So when you leave the house, always charge your phone before leaving. So if need be, you can record and document these social encounters. Video has a way of keeping some people off of their bullshit. Look out for one another in public. Black people stick with each other, and don't let aggressors rat pack on each other if you can help it. You don't need to get in shouting matches with stupid ass people. You don't need to get in shit talking contests. You don't need to engage Trump supporters by taunting them or, doing a little shit talking over Biden's presidential win. We already got what we want for now. And plus, if you got the urge to have some fun or some shit talking, call one of your friends. I don't know, or do one of them goddamn dances on TikTok or something like that. I love what an old martial arts instructor of mine said once about this kind of thing. And he basically said, you can't get into trouble if you're not there. So do what you can to remove yourself from the situation. You don't have to get engaged with that. So I want to bring this home by talking about some of our elected officials. And one thing I observed in the last 4 years is how disciplined the GOP was with supporting Trump and supporting one another and towing the party line. Now, it was applied to a racist, corrupt, and divisive ends, but this is partially why they were so successful at what they did. There's a big difference. As liberal-minded people, as progressive, we need to borrow a page out of their playbook. And I want to say perhaps maybe double down on that. The caveat, however, is that we need to be on the right side of morality and humanity and history. So get off any horseshit about our newly elected officials, our leaders, their faults, and fully get behind them. Once again, Democrats have inherited a huge mess from the GOP. Last time around, it was an economic collapse back in 2008 that Bush left. This time, obviously, there's, a significant pandemic, and again, more economic turmoil that needs to be addressed in the biggest way. This will take time and effort for a Biden White House and members of the House and members of the Senate and local governments to clean it up. Things are fucked up. Hell, Biden might even be lucky if there's still carpet and bathroom fixtures in the White House by the time they get there in January, on January 20th after Trump's people leave. These fucking nothings. Ugh. So now, maybe people aren't looking at Biden and Harris all doughy-eyed like they're having some high school crush. They're not Obama. They're not the ideal candidate. You can say what you want, but I guarantee you, in terms of competence, they'll be head and shoulders above Trump and Pence and their entire cabinet. So at the federal, the state, and the local levels, we need to support them in the right way, but also hold them accountable. We should be grateful that Trump is on his way out and proud of the work that many of us committed to getting this done. But we have to insist that our needs as Black voters are met. They can't just take our votes and then never be seen like it's some weird fucking one night stand after going to a club. So for the Trump associates who aren't going to jail, they might be looking for some political and in some cases, some criminal payback. I said this last episode. Don't count on them changing their colors, and don't count on them going away so easily. This is why we gotta work. And trust me when I say they are plotting for the next go around. This is why we need our elected officials to aggressively address the growing threat of white supremacy in this country. The FBI has already documented this. This is why we need greater criminal justice reform so our people aren't, disproportionately incarcerated and killed and targeted. There are nearly 42 million Black people in the United States, some of which are skilled workers and college degree holders. And we deserve opportunity for fair housing and gainful employment and economic prosperity, just like our white counterparts and just like other people of color. It's as simple as that. So, what I'm saying to all of you is that we need new initiatives that serves the Black community baked into these new policies, whatever they are and whatever they look like. And when they're not working in our best interest, we need to hold them accountable and tell them straight up and be direct when they're fucking up and they're not serving our needs. We're not the center of the universe, but we're a part of the equation. And let's face it, nobody expects the GOP and the House or the Senate to be very cooperative with this new White House administration, especially since they just got their asses handed to them, and especially since there's now a Black woman as the first female VP who's competent. But we need to pressure them and our elected officials to be tough, for these people to be creative and fight on our behalf. That is why, in all honesty, I respect the toughness from people like OAC and Kamala Harris and Katie Porter and Elizabeth Warren and other people on the liberal side. And maybe you should too. So never forget how bad things have been in the last 4 years and what could have happened should Trump have won re-election for another 4 years. Holy shit. This is a reminder of the power of unity and organization and our vote and our voice as Black people. Many of us, like you guys, did this. We did this, and it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, one final thing that I want to leave Black people with is a question. And outside of reciting a quote or a historical reference, I beg the question, is it time that we let other uses of the N-word go for good? You could take the position of like, hey, we now own that word, it's ours, and it's like a term of endearment. But my question as a Black man is this: how is it helping things for us socially and the way we treat one another? Like it or not, the world is watching us very closely. They hear that word in our music and through conversation. And again, this is a country where 70 million people voted for a white supremacist. The shit was fucking close. And you gotta ask yourself, does the use of this word help our case for equality? Give it some thought. I ain't saying nobody gotta do anything, all right? So with that, I'll wrap this up. Think about it. As promised, next episode, part 2, is dedicated to our allies that stood beside us and resisting and overturning the Trump presidency, of the white people, of the people of color, our allies. There's a lot of them. We couldn't have done it without you. I appreciate it. And that wraps it up for this episode. Same thing. I fucking hate saying this part. Like, if you like it, if you like what I'm saying, subscribe through all the podcast platforms, the audio platforms, YouTube, sign up for social media, Twitter, Instagram. I don't remember this shit. I've said I'm not great at it. Just search Misconnected. Like, I think Twitter is Misconnected P, and I think Instagram is Misconnected Podcast. I might be on Facebook. I probably am. I'm on TikTok, but I don't do a bunch of shit on there. So, look, again, take care of yourself, or take care of yourselves. Be diligent, be safe. Next episode, to tease that, I'm actually going to do something on Chadwick Boseman. I think he was a great actor. As many of you know, he died of colon cancer. My mother died of colon cancer. So I have some insight for especially, people in general, but Black people, of my experience in watching what a horrible, horrible disease that is. So it's not going to be a long episode that I anticipate, but I want to share some experiences and share some medical recommendations on getting yourself checked out and living as long as you can and disease-free as you can. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. Take care.